The discovery happened on an overcast Saturday afternoon when the narrator wandered through a crowded estate sale held at the edge of a nearly forgotten town. The house itself seemed ordinary enough, an aging structure packed with decades of accumulated belongings, most of which were destined to be sold for a few dollars and carried away by strangers. While searching through a stack of dusty boxes in the attic, the narrator found a small cardboard container tucked behind a broken dresser. The box contained old letters, yellowed receipts, and dozens of black and white photographs whose corners had curled with age. Most of the images depicted everyday moments, birthday celebrations, family gatherings, children playing in yards, and smiling relatives posing beside cars that had long since rusted away. Nothing about them appeared unusual until one photograph slipped free from the pile and landed face up on the floor. The image showed a family standing in front of a large farmhouse surrounded by tall grass. Written neatly on the back were the words, "The Marsh Family." At first glance, it looked like any ordinary family portrait from decades past. The parents stood proudly in the center while their children lined up beside them, each wearing formal clothing and stiff expressions. Yet something about the photograph felt wrong. The narrator couldn't immediately identify the source of the discomfort, only that the image demanded a second look. Holding it closer to the attic window, the narrator studied every detail carefully. The sunlight in the picture appeared to be coming from the left side, casting long shadows across the ground. Every family member had a visible shadow stretching behind them, except for the youngest child standing near the edge of the group. The absence was impossible to ignore once noticed. The boy appeared perfectly clear in every other respect. His clothes were visible, his features sharp despite the photograph's age, and his feet rested firmly on the grass. Yet beneath him there was nothing. No shadow. No dark outline. No indication that he occupied physical space the way the others did. The narrator turned the photograph over repeatedly, searching for signs of damage or tampering. There were none. The image appeared untouched. As the attic grew darker and the storm clouds outside thickened, an uneasy feeling settled in, transforming simple curiosity into a growing obsession that refused to fade. The unsettling photograph remained on the narrator's desk for days, impossible to ignore despite repeated attempts to find a rational explanation for the missing shadow. Eventually, curiosity evolved into determination, and the narrator began researching the Marsh family in hopes of uncovering the truth behind the strange image. At first, the task seemed simple. In an age when nearly every historical record could be found online, locating information about a family that once owned a large farmhouse should have taken only a few minutes. Yet the search quickly became frustrating. Every database that should have contained information about the Marsh family either produced incomplete results or none at all. Census records listed neighboring families but omitted the Marshes entirely. Property records referenced land transfers involving the farm, but the names associated with ownership changed unexpectedly, as if entire decades had been erased. The narrator expanded the search beyond public databases and began examining old newspaper archives. There, faint traces of the family emerged. Several articles mentioned the Marsh property in passing, usually in connection with local events or agricultural reports. However, whenever an article appeared to contain meaningful information, portions of it were missing. Some pages had been damaged during digitization, while others seemed to have vanished altogether. One headline referenced a tragedy connected to the Marsh family, yet the accompanying story could not be found anywhere in the archive. Another article mentioned an investigation near the property, but the text abruptly ended before providing any details. The deeper the narrator dug, the stranger the inconsistencies became. Online genealogy forums contained discussions about local history, but every thread mentioning the Marsh family stopped suddenly, often with deleted comments or missing replies. Historical photographs of the town showed buildings and landmarks that still existed, yet the Marsh farmhouse appeared absent even during years when records suggested it should have been standing. Local maps revealed similar anomalies. In some editions the property was clearly marked, while in others it seemed to disappear entirely. Late one evening, the narrator discovered a scanned town directory from decades earlier. The Marsh family name appeared on one page, only to vanish from the following year's edition without explanation. No record of relocation, death, or sale accompanied the disappearance. It was as though the family had simply been removed from history. With every missing document and every altered record, the narrator became increasingly convinced that these were not random archival errors but fragments of a deliberate effort to conceal something that someone desperately wanted forgotten. Unable to find clear answers through records and archives, the narrator decided that the only way to learn more about the Marsh family was to visit the town where they had once lived. The place seemed frozen in time, with quiet streets, aging storefronts, and a lingering sense that little had changed in decades. Most residents were polite but guarded whenever the Marsh family was mentioned. Some claimed they had never heard the name before, while others quickly changed the subject and walked away. The reactions were strange enough to convince the narrator that the family was not simply forgotten. People knew something, but they were unwilling to talk about it. After several days of asking questions, the narrator was directed toward an elderly resident who had lived in the town nearly his entire life. He spent most afternoons sitting alone on the porch of a weathered house overlooking a narrow road leading toward the marshlands. At first, he refused to discuss the Marsh family. The moment he heard the name, his expression darkened, and he stared silently into the distance. Only after persistent questioning did he finally agree to speak. Even then, his voice remained low, as though he feared someone might overhear. The old man explained that the Marsh family had once been well known in the area. They kept mostly to themselves, but everyone knew where they lived. Strange stories surrounded them for years, though most residents dismissed them as rumors. What truly frightened people, however, was not the family itself but what happened to those who became interested in them. According to the old man, several individuals had spent years investigating the family's history. A local journalist had become obsessed with uncovering the truth behind a series of disappearances connected to the property. Before he could publish his findings, he abruptly vanished. His car was discovered abandoned near the marsh, but he was never seen again. Others suffered different fates. A teacher who researched local legends reportedly experienced severe paranoia and eventually left town without warning. Another resident claimed to hear voices calling his name from the marsh at night after exploring the family's past. Within months, he suffered a mental breakdown. The old man leaned forward and fixed the narrator with an uneasy stare before delivering a final warning. He said that some secrets do not stay buried because they are forgotten. They stay buried because they do not want to be found, and anyone who digs too deeply eventually becomes part of the story. The old man's warning should have been enough to convince the narrator to leave town, but instead it only strengthened the growing determination to uncover the truth. Every missing record, every frightened reaction, and every whispered rumor seemed to point toward a single location, the abandoned Marsh farmhouse. The property stood several miles beyond the town limits, surrounded by dense vegetation and overlooked by most maps. Reaching it required traveling down an overgrown dirt road that appeared unused for years. By the time the narrator arrived, the sun was beginning to sink behind a wall of dark clouds, casting long shadows across the decaying structure. The farmhouse was in far worse condition than expected. Broken windows lined the exterior, and sections of the roof had partially collapsed. Nature had slowly reclaimed the property, with vines creeping up the walls and tall grass swallowing the surrounding yard. Despite the obvious signs of abandonment, an unsettling feeling lingered in the air, as though the place had never truly been empty. The narrator entered through a damaged side door and began exploring the interior. Dust coated every surface, and many rooms contained little more than rotting furniture and forgotten belongings. Yet several details felt unusual. Certain areas appeared far less deteriorated than others, as if they had been disturbed more recently. While examining a hallway near the back of the house, the narrator noticed inconsistencies in the building's layout. The dimensions of the interior did not seem to match the structure's exterior shape. A section of wall occupied a space where another room should have existed. Curious, the narrator obtained old property documents and blueprints from the county archives. After comparing them with the farmhouse, a disturbing discrepancy became clear. The original plans included a room beneath the house that did not appear on any modern records. In fact, every later blueprint showed signs of alteration, with the underground space completely removed. Returning to the farmhouse with this information, the narrator searched for evidence of a concealed entrance. After hours of investigation, a loose section of flooring inside a storage room revealed a rusted metal hatch hidden beneath layers of dust. The hatch blended perfectly into the surrounding floorboards, explaining why it had remained undiscovered for so long. Its heavy lock had long since corroded away. As the narrator pulled it open, a foul odor drifted upward from the darkness below, accompanied by a sudden rush of cold air. Beneath the house, a narrow staircase descended into a hidden chamber that had been deliberately erased from every official record ever created. With a flashlight trembling in hand, the narrator descended the narrow staircase beneath the Marsh farmhouse. Each step groaned underfoot, echoing through the darkness below. The air grew colder with every foot of descent, carrying a damp, decaying smell that seemed to seep from the walls themselves. At the bottom of the staircase lay a large underground chamber unlike anything the narrator had expected. The room was far older than the farmhouse above it. Its stone walls appeared ancient, weathered by time and moisture, suggesting that the structure had existed long before the Marsh family ever settled on the property. Scattered throughout the chamber were shelves filled with journals, photographs, and personal belongings spanning multiple generations. Some items dated back more than a century. As the narrator examined them, a horrifying pattern began to emerge. The Marsh family had not merely lived on the land, they had served as caretakers of something hidden beneath it. Journal entries written by different family members described strange occurrences in the surrounding marshlands, voices calling from the fog, figures standing in the water at night, and disappearances that authorities could never explain. Though separated by decades, the accounts shared one disturbing detail. They all referred to an unseen presence that existed beneath the marsh, something ancient that demanded sacrifices in exchange for remaining dormant. The deeper the narrator searched, the clearer the truth became. Generations of the Marsh family had secretly offered missing travelers, drifters, and occasionally even members of their own bloodline to this mysterious entity. In return, the surrounding town remained untouched by the horrors described in the journals. Whenever the rituals were neglected, people vanished in greater numbers, strange sightings increased, and unexplained tragedies spread throughout the region. The family believed they were protecting everyone by continuing the tradition. Among the final documents was a collection of photographs. Many showed individuals reported missing over the decades. Their faces appeared repeatedly across different years, standing near the marsh with identical expressions despite the passage of time. The last photograph chilled the narrator more than any other. It depicted the Marsh family portrait that had started the entire investigation. This time, however, the missing shadow of the youngest child finally made sense. Written beneath the image was a short note explaining that the boy had already been given to the thing beneath the marsh weeks before the photograph was taken, and what stood beside the family that day had never truly been their son. Themselves.